Rajiv Malhotra was a billionaire with power, influence, and enemies. Ananya Sharma was the beautiful young wife who vanished without a trace just 1 year after their fairy tale wedding. What began as a glamorous love story between India's most eligible tycoon and a small-town beauty queen ended in a chilling mystery aboard a luxury yacht, with no witnesses, no body, and no clear answers. Rajiv Malhotra was a name that carried weight in every elite circle in India. At 56, he had built a billion-dollar empire from luxury hotels, cruise liners, and diamond boutiques. Known for his sharp business mind and opulent lifestyle, Rajiv had everything money could buy: penthouses in Mumbai and Monaco, a fleet of imported cars, and a calendar filled with celebrity events. Yet, despite his fortune and influence, he had never married. That changed the moment he met Ananya Sharma. She was 24, a former Miss Rajasthan, and had recently completed her MBA. She wasn't just beautiful. She was ambitious, poised, and intelligent. They met at a high-profile charity gala in Goa, where Ananya had been invited as a guest speaker. Rajiv, intrigued by her confidence and charm, arranged to meet her privately the next day. Within weeks, they were seen together at events in Dubai, London, and Paris. By the end of the year, he proposed. Their wedding in Udaipur became the most talked-about event of the season. Celebrities, politicians, and foreign dignitaries flew in on chartered planes. The media dubbed them the modern Maharaja and Maharani, and their story was portrayed as a fairy tale, a successful older man finding love with a vibrant young woman. But behind the glitter and headlines, whispers had already begun. Some said Ananya had married for money. Others hinted that Rajiv had finally found someone he could control. Neither spoke to the press about their relationship, preferring to keep things private. Still, the public watched closely, fascinated by the stark contrast between the self-made tycoon and the small-town girl turned princess. Their life looked perfect on the outside. No one knew it was the beginning of a dark and deadly story. After the wedding, Ananya's life transformed almost overnight. From modest beginnings in Jaipur, she was suddenly living in sprawling penthouses, traveling by private jet, and attending gala dinners with royalty and billionaires. Designer clothes, diamonds, and luxury vacations became her new normal. On the surface, it looked like a dream life, a young woman swept into a world of endless luxury. But those close to her noticed something had changed. She rarely returned calls, stopped meeting old friends, and slowly withdrew from social media. Her once lively online presence became almost silent, with only occasional photos posted by Rajiv's PR team. Behind the scenes, Ananya was growing more isolated. Rajiv controlled much of her life, where she went, who she spoke to, and even how she dressed in public. He insisted she attend every business event and made it clear he wanted her by his side at all times. Private staff noted she was never left alone, even inside her own home. Her phone was replaced with a new device, supposedly for security, but one that only Rajiv's team had access to. Friends who did manage to speak to her said she seemed distant and guarded. When asked about her new life, she gave short answers and avoided eye contact. She smiled at the right moments, said the right things, but something felt rehearsed, almost like she was performing a role. Then came Rajiv's grand gesture, a 200-foot luxury yacht named the Sapphire Star, gifted to her on their first anniversary. The media hailed it as the ultimate sign of devotion, but to Ananya, it marked something different. In private, she described the yacht as beautiful but cold, and later told a friend it felt less like a gift and more like a cage with golden walls. Just weeks after the wedding, a confidential legal document quietly surfaced, one that would later become a critical piece of the puzzle. Rajiv Malhotra had revised his will. According to the new terms, if anything were to happen to him, 70% of his vast fortune would pass directly to Ananya. The remaining 30% was allocated to various charities and trusts. But a hidden clause revealed something far more curious. If Ananya died before him, her share would be revoked entirely, and the full estate would default to Rajiv's estranged brother, Vikram Malhotra. This revelation raised eyebrows among legal experts. Why would a man who had just married the supposed love of his life write such a one-sided clause. Vikram, who hadn't spoken to Rajiv in years due to a bitter business dispute, stood to gain a fortune, but only under the right circumstances. The timing of the will change was also notable. It had been signed and witnessed just 10 days after the wedding, during a private trip to Dubai, far from the scrutiny of Indian legal authorities. The public didn't know this at the time, but investigative journalists began to dig deeper. In doing so, they uncovered unsettling details from Rajiv's past. Two of his previous long-term partners had accused him of controlling behavior, including surveillance, threats, and emotional abuse. One had mysteriously vanished during a vacation in Greece in 2012. Though the case was dismissed as accidental disappearance, no body was ever recovered. No charges had ever stuck to Rajiv, but the patterns were there: power, secrecy, and a trail of women who either vanished or stayed silent. The altered will added a new layer of suspicion. It was no longer just a marriage under the spotlight. It was a potential trap, carefully designed and legally bound. In May 2025, Rajiv and Ananya boarded the Sapphire Star for what was described as a private getaway along the Mediterranean. The yacht was one of the largest privately owned vessels in the region, complete with a helipad, multiple decks, and a full crew that had been personally selected by Rajiv's team. According to public statements, the trip was meant to celebrate their first anniversary in peace, away from paparazzi and business obligations. But what was supposed to be a romantic voyage quickly turned into an international mystery. 3 days into the journey, a distress call was made from the yacht while it was sailing near the coast of Corsica. The message, transmitted to the maritime authorities, was brief and urgent. Passenger overboard. Request immediate assistance. When the Coast Guard arrived hours later, Ananya was nowhere to be found. The search extended overnight, using helicopters, patrol boats, and divers. But despite the efforts, there was no trace of her body. The ocean had swallowed any evidence that might have explained what happened. Rajiv appeared devastated. He gave a short statement expressing shock and sorrow before being flown back to Mumbai by private jet. The crew, tight-lipped and coordinated, insisted that Ananya had slipped while walking alone on the upper deck. They said it happened suddenly, and there wasn't enough time to react. But investigators were immediately suspicious. Conditions at sea were calm that evening. The yacht had advanced safety rails, motion detectors, and an overboard alert system, none of which seemed to activate. Even more troubling, the ship's surveillance cameras had stopped recording during the critical hours leading up to the incident. Rajiv claimed it was a technical glitch, but to those investigating, it felt less like a tragic accident and more like something that had been planned with precision. As investigators dug deeper into the events aboard the Sapphire Star, inconsistencies began to surface, starting with the crew. Each member had been interviewed separately, yet their accounts of the night Ananya disappeared didn't align. One steward claimed Ananya had been drinking heavily, stumbling on the deck just before she fell. Another insisted she had been calm, sober, and preparing to go to bed. A third mentioned hearing raised voices, possibly an argument, coming from the couple's private quarters hours before the distress call. What made things even more suspicious was the yacht surveillance system. For a vessel of that size and value, its security setup was state-of-the-art. It had high-resolution cameras covering every major area, including the deck where Ananya supposedly fell. But during the window of her disappearance, all footage was missing. Technicians later confirmed the cameras weren't malfunctioning. They had been manually disabled. No footage, no alerts, no recorded movement. It was as if someone had wanted the ship to go dark at precisely the right time. Then came the ship's log, a record of the yacht's movements, communications, and timestamps. Investigators discovered the log had been altered. The time of the distress call did not match the GPS data. Satellite tracking showed the yacht had remained stationary in the same spot for nearly 2 hours before calling for help. The question was why. It no longer looked like a panicked emergency. It looked like a delay, possibly to destroy evidence, coordinate a story, or ensure the scene was clean before anyone arrived. Suspicion began to focus squarely on Rajiv. His wealth and influence had insulated him for decades, but now the cracks were beginning to show. Authorities weren't just investigating a disappearance. They were investigating a cover-up. Weeks after Ananya's disappearance, the investigation reached a turning point when a close friend from her university days came forward. She revealed that Ananya had been using a hidden email account to stay in touch with a few trusted friends outside of Rajiv's knowledge. Through these emails, a very different picture of her marriage began to emerge. Far from the glamorous, fairy tale life portrayed in the media, Ananya described feeling watched, restricted, and afraid. She wrote about losing her freedom, about the constant surveillance, and about Rajiv's unpredictable moods. In one particularly disturbing message, she mentioned that she no longer had access to her own bank account, that her phone was being monitored, and that she suspected someone in the staff was reporting her movements directly to Rajiv. What stood out most were the emails written just days before the yacht trip. In one of them, she wrote, "He's planning something. I don't know what, but I can feel it. If something happens to me out there, it won't be an accident." The message was dated 4 days before she vanished at sea. Armed with this new information, international authorities reclassified the case as a suspicious death rather than a disappearance. But by then, Rajiv had already left India for Dubai, where he held dual citizenship and was out of reach of Indian law enforcement. When approached for questioning by French authorities, he declined, citing stress and trauma. Meanwhile, digital forensics confirmed the emails were authentic. Ananya had indeed been trying to escape. She was planning to leave Rajiv quietly after the yacht trip, possibly with legal help. But she never got the chance. The messages were chilling, not only for their content, but because they suggested she may have known her fate long before the world realized she was in danger. As international pressure mounted and public outrage grew, an unexpected figure stepped into the spotlight. Vikram Malhotra, Rajiv's younger brother. Once a rising star in the family business, Vikram had been pushed out years earlier after a bitter fallout over company shares. The brothers hadn't spoken since, and many believed Vikram had left the country permanently. But now, with Ananya's disappearance making global headlines, Vikram resurfaced, and he brought evidence. He filed a legal petition in Mumbai, accusing Rajiv of financial fraud and obstruction of justice. Alongside this, he submitted a dossier compiled by a private investigator he had secretly hired months earlier. The file included surveillance images, financial records, and a stunning piece of drone footage taken near the coast of Corsica. The video showed the Sapphire Star idling far from its reported coordinates. On board, a crew member, believed to be Rajiv's personal assistant, was seen dragging a large object wrapped in a dark tarp across the rear deck. Minutes later, the object was gone, and the yacht resumed movement. Though the footage was grainy and the object unidentifiable, the timing aligned eerily with the window when Ananya went missing. Experts reviewing the footage confirmed it had not been digitally altered. Vikram claimed this was proof of foul play and demanded a full-scale international investigation. Rajiv's legal team quickly dismissed the evidence as deepfake nonsense, accusing Vikram of exploiting tragedy for personal revenge. But the damage had been done. The media latched onto the footage, and public opinion turned sharply against Rajiv. For the first time, the case was no longer just a mystery. It was beginning to look like murder. The question now wasn't whether something happened to Ananya, but whether Rajiv had orchestrated it from the start. By early 2026, the case had reached a boiling point. With mounting evidence, damning digital records, and international media scrutiny, French and Indian authorities coordinated to issue a red notice through Interpol for Rajiv Malhotra's arrest. He was officially wanted for questioning in connection with the suspected death of his wife, Ananya Sharma. But when officials attempted to locate him, Rajiv had already disappeared. His Dubai mansion was empty, his staff dismissed, and his private jet had departed days earlier on a flight plan that abruptly ended over the Indian Ocean. No landing records, no radio contact, no trace. Some believed he had faked his disappearance, using his wealth and global connections to vanish. Rumors swirled about a private island in the Seychelles, a remote property in South America, even a discreet monastery in the Alps. None could be confirmed. Rajiv had built his life on secrecy, And now, it seemed, he had used that same skill to escape justice. Despite the Interpol notice, no sightings were ever verified. 6 months after her disappearance, Ananya Sharma was declared legally dead. Her family, heartbroken and silenced by non-disclosure agreements, received no inheritance. Due to the suspicious nature of her case, Rajiv's assets were frozen temporarily, but without a body or a conviction, no criminal proceedings could move forward. Eventually, the courts allowed partial control of the estate to pass to Vikram Malhotra, who pledged to use the money to investigate his brother's network and seek justice. But as time passed, the trail grew cold. The cameras had been shut off. The logs had been altered. The ocean had erased its secrets. And Rajiv Malhotra, once the king of a diamond empire, had vanished, leaving behind a mystery that may never be solved.